What up chaps, I'm MagicalMike and today I'd like to finally put together all of my remaining footage from creating my legendary weapons. I've got 3 of them at this point. The timing here kind of ties in nicely with some of the recent news, and I've been meaning to get this up on the channel for literally years anyway, so let's just do it. As many of you guys will know, I had a series on the channel at one point called Building My Legend, which is this kind of where I attempted to guide everyone through my own legendary crafting process and hopefully help other people out with the tips and tricks that I'd picked up along the way. It was a lot more edited than this is going to be, but you know, this is how it is now. So I did videos on how to obtain obsidian shards, karma, mystic clovers, the gift of mastery, getting your crafting professions to 400, and not 1 but 2 videos on doing your dailies, back when they were actually a source of laurels and not just logging in every day. And that was the very first thing that threw my interest for the series. Systems started to change at irregular times and things got weird, so one way of earning karma suddenly became obsolete or just terrible, only to be replaced by something else and then a couple of months later replaced by something else again. So laurels in particular are the example here. They became the best source of tier 6 materials, not through doing your dailies but by just logging in every day and then doing other stuff, and basically dailies became a strange thing. Tier 6 materials became different ways to obtain those became the best way. Farming silver wastes became the best source of gold and obsidian shards, and a lot of information basically became outdated and invalid too frequently to continue the series like that. So I did originally have videos planned to tell everyone how to farm lodestones, ectos, the gift of metal or wood or whatever else you needed for your legendary, the gifts of might and magic, and also how to get gold efficiently, which was at the time by doing fractals, dungeons and world bosses. They were the 3 main things. But as time passed and more things changed and made my methods less effective or less interesting, that series just kind of completely stalled until such a point where precursor crafting would become a relevant topic, because back in late 2012 and 2013 they were actually saying, hey, we're going to do this, and I was like, alright, the series can go on hold for a short amount of time while I get that. And then fast forward to 2016, right? Which is where we're at now, finally, with actual precursor crafting. It took a lot longer than I expected to get this stuff out, which I should have predicted at that point because ANET really never released anything properly or on time, but you know, I had some faith back then. In fact, what we had hoped would come in an update at some point eventually did make its way into the game as an expansion feature that we had to pay for. So it's gated behind a paywall, and behind the awfully boring mastery system that I've explained why I dislike so much previously. Several problems came about right off the bat. The mastery gating was dull, the crafting was advertised as epic journeys, I think back at PAX South when they first announced Heart of Thorns, and it instead turned into go craft a bunch of junk and then sit at a crafting bench for a couple of hours and, oh yeah, dump a bunch of gold and materials into. It's just not really epic, is it? A ton of the collections were also tied to impossible events, and they had bugs, and some of which still aren't fixed 5 months later. What's going on there? I didn't like the system at all, and where I thought the idea could have been very cool and I could have made some video guides based off of these epic quests, it just didn't come close to being something that I ever wanted to really cover, so I never did. And that's why you've been watching me craft the Juggernaut, kamohoali'i, Kotaki, and Sunrise in this kind of weird video format instead. So I'll briefly talk about some of the details with my experiences for just a quick minute, and then I want to talk about why I'm making this video after that. So I started building the Juggernaut as my first legendary, and at the time only planned legendary, back in 2012. I started properly working on it on the 16th of November 2012 when the Lost Shores event dropped a Colossus precursor for one of my guildies who was called Danger Zone back then. He offered to sell it to me for a paltry 100 gold, which was a lot at the time for me, but still a really killer deal, so obviously I took it. On Christmas Eve, I'd finally finished gathering all of my 250 silver doubloons, which was a great pain in the arse, but hey, I got that done pretty quickly. And then a week later, I started making my clovers. On the 16th of February, I finished making my lodestones and a few other materials. And on the 17th of March 2013, just a few months later, I finished the hammer itself entirely. It was a pretty big deal to have a legendary just 7 months into the release of the game, but nowadays it's not that impressive. People have a bunch of legendaries, myself included, but it was and still is a very cool item to have. Some of the screenshots that you will have been seeing and are currently seeing maybe show just how much gold some of these items cost at the time, like the precursor, which is like 650 gold in the screenshot, ectos, doubloons and lodestones and all that stuff. Just interesting tidbits to look back on, I think. Later on, my friend BitCloud convinced me through some weird methods and logic to make an underwater legendary, somehow, because he had Kraken, so I started work on the spear, since the precursor was only 50 gold at the time. I finished that spear on the 1st of February 2014, just under a year later, and originally I had decided to work on it casually, as an experiment to see how long it would take without being the only goal I had in-game. In the end it took too long, so I sold a bunch of Super Adventure Box skins that I had for a huge chunk of gold. I think 300, 400 gold worth of Super Adventure Box skins at the time. That was nice, although I wish I still had those skins now. And then quite quickly, soon after that, I set my sights on Sunrise, because I didn't really want an underwater legendary. That was just kind of a joke, but I did want Sunrise. This also took me forever to do, but by saving laurels and spending time on tier 6 materials, Spending them on tier 6 materials, I eventually surprised myself with the amount of resources that I'd built up over time, and built my final legendary on the 24th of November 2015, just after Heart of Thorns released. Unfortunately, I haven't really played much more after that, and Sunrise hasn't really seen much use. I wasn't particularly interested in the Heart of Thorns legendaries, so that was pretty much it for me, and now you know my legendary history, which isn't really that legendary if you think about it. It's just a lot of grind. So now to move on to the reason why I'm talking about these at this point, like right now, the whole secondary purpose for this video. So a few days ago, Mike O'Brien made an announcement regarding Heart of Thorns and new legendary weapons. I will say that the communication aspect of this whole issue is actually a huge positive, so well done on that. But there's a lot of issues with exactly what's being said. You see, when we were sold the expansion pack, a lot of people paid money to gain access to a feature that was advertised as part of it, the legendary weapons. So this quote is taken directly from the Guild Wars 2 website. "We will be releasing new legendary weapons in small groups at regular intervals until a full set of 16 has been added to the game." Okay. Originally, people had hoped that Heart of Thorns would ship with all 19 weapons, which wasn't too unreasonable since they'd had over a year of development time, and the Raven staff, Nevermore, had already been data mined in the game files for almost a year previously before the announcement of Heart of Thorns. Then we got told that there would only be 3 weapons at the initial release, so we got the staff, the pistol and the axe, which were also late, I believe. Alright, well that was disappointing news, but as I read in the last quote, we had the promise of getting the rest eventually, so it was still all okay. But wait, 16 weapons? No, whoa, hold on. There's 19 weapons total. But oh, that's right. They had canned the underwater ones beforehand. So we've gone from having all 19 in the game at launch to only having 3 and not having any new underwater legendaries at all. Promises are just starting to fall apart now, aren't they? And now it's been 5 months since that X-Pack shipped, so where are our promised legendary weapons? Well, I'll say that they're canned, they're binned, forgotten, quote, indefinitely suspended, end quote. We are to receive a new shortbow in the next content update, whenever that is, I think April, and then after that, no more new legendaries. They are indefinitely suspended, which is as close as you can possibly get to basically being cancelled forever. Now, as a player who doesn't really even play right now, and even if I was doing, I wouldn't care all that much about these weapons, as I've said, I'm not that bothered about this news. However, as a consumer, we should be bothered, where rightfully so even. People should be annoyed and not quite angry, but, you know, they should take issue with this news, because a promised feature that we've paid for is no longer gonna get the support that it was advertised as having. Quite honestly, I personally now have little to no faith in this company to deliver on any promises. The World vs. World overhaul, the legendaries, the fractal leaderboards, the fractal backpiece that still isn't here, Raid Wings beyond the 3rd and final, the legendary armour, to me are all kind of dust in the wind at the moment. They haven't been delivered. And who can even tell if any of these things will ever materialise? And yeah, you can argue that's sensationalist and a little bit silly to even say, but It's kind of how I feel right now. This whole fiasco with the weapons being suspended to me is just more evidence that the expansion is a complete flop in just about all regards. And worse still is that the legendary team has been moved into the living story team, presumably to try and speed that process up or streamline it or something, because it's going too slowly? I don't know. To me, there's literally no way that adding these 6 people onto that current team is actually going to make any kind of a difference at all. I don't think it's going to benefit us as players or consumers in any way. And the people saying that this is a good thing are, frankly, I hate to say it, but I think they're delusional. I think you're flat out wrong. ANET, however, are totally fine with having a dedicated team building the next expansion pack though. 70 people working on that next thing instead of what's missing in this one that we've already paid for, and allowing the current one to kind of shrivel up and die and cripple the game and its player base along with it. And while yes, it is a smart idea to keep having those people dedicated to that, it's also leaving a sour taste in our mouths because we've got an inferior product in the meantime. That's the issue here, and there is no great solution to this. You can't pull people off and fix this, and you can't say, well, we'll pull people off the Living World team and fix the legendary thing. It's just a big mess that really there's no good solution to at all. Anyway, once again, I'm sure there's plenty of people at ArenaNet who just want to do the best that they can and just make cool shit for people to play. I get that, I really, really do. But some stupid crap is going on at that company and stifling these talented people's ability to actually produce that quality content. I'm sorry this turned into kind of a huge rant video, and I didn't really mean for it to do that, but part of me is really bothered about it because it's just another negative and more drama to talk about. But most of me just doesn't really care all that much at all. It's overall a pretty silly issue, but it's something that I think needs to be talked about. We will see if people ever see any kind of sense in this sort of thing, if the content actually steps up to the mark eventually and Mike O'Brien's promises get realised, or if the subreddit circle jerks just keep going on forever and ever and ever. I'm MagicalMike, and thank you very much for listening to me rant.